Lagrangian and Hamiltonian mechanics, a brief introduction. From the workings of Zeno to Pascal to Riemann, mathematicians have spent their entire lives devoted to answering the age-old question, what is this? They have worked tirelessly for centuries, attempting simply to unravel the mysteries of the natural world. Beginning with the famous apple supposedly dropping before a young Cambridge student, through the development of machines capable of escaping the very same force drawing the apple to the ground, those mathematicians specifically worked towards the development of mechanics and the deepest understanding of how the universe functions. Developed from Sir Isaac Newton's classical mechanics, two mathematicians have shown in their derivations, creating new versions of mechanics. Joseph Louis Lagrange, most known for the formula dubbed Lagrange error, developed Lagrange equations of the first as well as the second kind, which vary in the utilization of constraints in equations. The former treats constraints as extra equations explicitly by using Lagrange multipliers, whereas the latter uses generalized coordinates to incorporate constraints. Half a century later, William Rowan Hamilton took Lagrange's reformulation of classical mechanics and reconfigured them into a more abstract understanding of some theories. His findings later contributed to the statistical and quantum mechanics of today. Joseph Louis Lagrange was born Giuseppe Lodovico Lagrangia on January 25, 1736, in Turin, Italy. While he was the youngest of 11 children born to the treasurer of war of Sardinia and Marie Therese Gros, Lagrange was also the only one to survive past infancy. He grew up in a family of wealth, but due to his father's speculation habits, his family fortune had been depleted by the time he was old enough to inherit it. While in school, Lagrange began studying classics, and by what is considered more or less an accident, he fell into mathematics through his studies of Euclid and Archimedes, and later found essays lamenting the superiority of calculus over the Greek synthetic geometrical methods. Of course, he was hooked. Lagrange mastered calculus entirely by himself, and at the age of 16, became a professor of mathematics at the Royal Artillery School in Turin. A reformulation of classical mechanics, Lagrangian mechanics is based upon Lagrange's two sets of equations, those which treat constraints explicitly as additional equations using Lagrange multipliers, and those using generalized coordinates to incorporate constraints. For conservative systems, there exists a Lagrangian function, L, for a system is defined to be the difference between the kinetic and potential energies expressed as a function of positions and velocities. In order to make the language more concise, shorthand for the complete set of positions in an n-particle system is used. Classical equations of motion are given by the equations resulting from application of the Euler-Lagrange equations, completely equivalent to Newton's second law, to a particular Lagrangian, are known as the equations of motion. The solution of these equations for a given initial condition is known as trajectory of the system resulting from what is known as an action principle. William Rowan Hamilton, the greatest man of science that Ireland has produced, was born August 4, 1805, to a religiously zealous solicitor and his wife, Sarah Hutton, whose family was well known for their intelligence. Orphaned at 14, however, much of his upbringing was due to his uncle James Hamilton, a man with almost inhuman linguistic abilities, who began caring for William at age 3 with the first signs of genius. Though his early education focused primarily on the study of multitudes of languages, Hamilton mastered mathematics through integral calculus and was able to calculate eclipses by age 17. Much of his mathematical study was through readings on Newton and Lagrange, although it remained a secondary line of study to classics, despite that being only a second love. Declared by some to be a second Newton, Hamilton was graciously welcomed as a celebrity into Trinity's College's classics program, where he completed the first draft of Part 1 of his memoir on systems of rays. Though some may consider them to be simple reformations of classical mechanics, Lagrange and Hamilton have contributed to topics such as statistical mechanics, quantum physics, thermodynamics, as well as a plethora of other scientific concentrations, and are thus widely lauded for their work